What's going on, Just Hoop Talk Nation? This is Justin Henry, Will Thompson, and today we will be talking about the trade, the blockbuster trade that was James Harden going to the Brooklyn Nets in a four-team deal, blockbuster trade. We're going to break it down and what this means for the teams coming up next.
You are now tuned in to the next best thing. Justin Henry, Will Thompson.
Yeah,
Let's
y'all
go.
can talk that talk, but this is just hoop talk. Updates on the news, analysis who's who gon' win, who gon' lose. Is it true? Is it true? This is just hoop talk. This is just hoop talk. Ball.
All right, guys, so we had a major trade. We don't see a whole lot of these just in the middle of the season, but a major blockbuster deal involving James Harden. It's been talked about on this show. It's been talked about in the media, but James Harden has finally gone to the Brooklyn Nets. Let's go over the details real quick, but I want to talk a little bit about just kind of some of even leading up to this deal and what happened in the media the other day with Harden just at the podium. It was kind of weird how that happened. And what this means also for the teams moving forward. So the trade details, Brooklyn gets James Harden. Houston Rockets were also involved. They received Victor Oladipo after swapping Karis LeVert to Indiana. So Houston got Victor Oladipo, Dante Exum, Rodinas Kirkus, 4 first-round picks, 4 first-round swaps. And that, to me, is loaded for Houston. We'll talk about that here in a second. The Cleveland Cavaliers were also involved. They received Jared Allen and Taurean Prince. Great defensive player in Jared Allen. And Indiana got Karis LeVert, obviously, after giving up Oladipo, and a second-round pick. Major news, man. Will, break down your initial thoughts on this deal.
Yeah, I think one thing I got to bring up, man, is I think the first place anyone ever heard about this trade was right here on Just Hoop Talk. You called it, man. You called it during what was that? It was our Brooklyn season preview.
What's next for the Brooklyn Nets? Check it out if you haven't. And I dare you to, in the comments, find somebody that announced that rumor before us.
I'm not gonna see it. You just came up with it. You just came up with it off the fly, off the top of your head, man.
It made sense,
man.
It
deal.
really did. Disgruntled player, a lot of assets. Boom.
As soon as you said it, it started popping up more on social media. People started talking about it. Started talking about it on ESPN. But the deal never happened. The deal didn't happen throughout the year. And then for it to happen now is a little interesting. I think one thing that helped the deal along, obviously, was getting 2 other teams involved with it. I think it didn't make sense necessarily just the Rockets and the Nets swapping. But, I mean, you gotta point out the obvious. The Kyrie situation kind of forced the Nets' hand as well. And we don't know what's going on with Kyrie. We don't know where he is mentally, where he'll be at all. No one knows anything about that. So I think that was part of what forced the Nets' hand and made this deal happen. So the timing, like you said, is really weird. Like, it's not at the trade deadline. It's not in the beginning of the season or the off season. It's just right in the middle of the first part of the season. So it's really awkward, but interesting deal. I think everyone kind of got what they wanted, which is weird. We know when you see deals like that, I think everyone kind of walked away happy, like, we got what we wanted,
Yeah. And to me, it was just awkward. I want to even go back a little bit further and talk a little bit about the night before, man, when James Harden kind of just went randomly. Like, obviously through the offseason, we knew that James Harden was disgruntled. We knew that he wasn't happy. The Rockets went and made some moves, got John Wall, signed DeMarcus Cousins, signed Christian Wood, and we were like, okay, this team could actually compete. Like, it was really looking like the Houston Rockets had the talent to compete for at least a playoff spot or make a push if James Harden got his stuff right. What we quickly found out is that James Harden didn't want to be there. He didn't show up, had some COVID tracing early in the season. And then even just in the last couple of games, we saw his effort level just drop to a minimum. And then to come out on the podium and just be like, no, this team isn't good enough, like just throwing everybody under the bus. To me, man, it's not a sign of a leader. It's not a sign of a good teammate. And it was really disappointing to see from a guy that many are calling a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer. So for me, overall, that was just really disappointing to see. And then the trade overall itself, we can break it down team by team and talk a little bit more about what this means for the Nets, but it seemed a little rushed. I felt like it did, like you mentioned, Kyrie being gone really forced the Nets' hand. And even though they didn't have to give up Kyrie, I feel like the Nets gave up way more than they wanted to and probably needed to get Harden. When you talk about a player like Karis LeVert, talk about a player like Jared Allen, those two could be potential all-stars in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to mention 4 first-round picks.
Man.
And 4 first-round pick swaps. That's a lot to give up for a player who's I think Harden's like 31, 32 in the middle of his prime with the hefty contract. I don't know, man. What are your thoughts overall on just what Brooklyn gave up? Because, I mean, you think about it, Karis LeVert's probably one of the better young offensive players that we have in the league, and Jared Allen's one of the better young defensive players that we have in the league.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen something similar to this before with the Nets. I won't compare the teams because obviously, you know, those guys were towards the end of their career. I'm talking about KG and Paul Pierce and that move. But it's similar in the sense that the Nets leverage their future on bringing in some guys that they feel like can win now.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of risk involved with that, and especially when you're dealing with personalities like these guys, you know? Like, there's no telling if these guys are going to be here long term. There's no telling if this is even going to work, if they're going to be on the same page, where they're at mentally. I think we know KD is here to play. He's here to ball out. Hopefully James Harden has a switch that he can flip, and you just hope that Kyrie gets right mentally, because the three of them together playing well is incredible, but it's a stretch, man. It really is a stretch to imagine that happening now. But if they can bring it all together, obviously the roster is crazy, man. Like, it really is.
I think it's even a stretch to think that they're all going to play together. When you talk about 3 ball-dominant players, I'm talking ball-dominant. Like, you see Kyrie and KD, the way that they handle, and then James Harden is an offense in himself. It still, to me, doesn't even seem like a great fit. Like, I almost think that the Nets were more solid with the roster that they had already, plus the talent that would have been there in the future with the draft picks. Like, to me, this trade doesn't really – I get it. You're getting the star power that you need to form the big 3 in the East. But you gave up one of your better bigs. You gave up your 6th man of the year probably in Karis LeVert. And then you gave up 4 first-round picks. To me, it's just like, well, you know, unless you win a championship in the next 3 years, is it really worth it, you know? And I think that, to be honest, they may have been able to win a championship without James Harden if they would have just kept the roster intact. So, I mean, when you look at the Brooklyn Nets, they were heralded as one of the deepest teams in the league coming into the season. You know, when you had, obviously, Spencer Dinwiddie went out, but then you mentioned Jared Allen coming off the bench. You got Karis LeVert coming off the bench. Like, these guys were, as we mentioned earlier, like potential all-stars in the making. And it's like you get rid of this young talent that really could have helped with the depth that might be needed for a COVID season, with the depth that might be needed for a bubble season later on. Like, to me, start talking about that, and I'm looking at a very thin roster now with a lot of older vets on the team when you're talking about DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen, and then you mixing in some other guys too. You know, you've got Joe Harris, Bruce Brown there. I don't know, man. I'm not feeling too confident about this Nets in their depth now. Yeah,
I look at these 3 guys, and you wonder who's going to take the back seat, right? Whose numbers are going to take a dive and take a dip. We've seen it before with Harden early in his career, being willing to come off the bench, but I don't see that same guy from James Harden now. Maybe he's got that in him, but I really don't see it. I think the scary part is with all of this is the fact that they have a brand new coach with Steve Nash, man. And so there's going to be so much pressure on Steve Nash to make this work, and he's going to have 3 guys breathing down his neck. Like, they want buckets, they want the ball, they want the attention and the spotlight. How they make all this work? Does Steve Nash, is he an X and O guy who can make, you know, some sort of offensive scheme that can get these guys the ball? I don't know, but I think in order for it to work, somebody's going to have to take the back seat, right? Like in Golden State, I would say Klay kind of, you know, took a step back and let KD be that dude, and even Steph took a little bit of a dip and let KD be that guy, but I don't know if any one of these dudes will be willing to take that step back for this to work.
It's crazy to think about because, I don't think James Harden is going to change his game for anybody, especially coming into a system that has Steve Nash, that has D'Antoni
Right.
played for already. Like, I don't really feel like he's going to be anything but a 30-point scorer in that offense. You talk about KD. KD is the man. Like, I think he's the best player on that team, and they have to treat it as such in order to win a championship like they're trying to do. So at least Kyrie, who already is kind of claiming he doesn't want to play basketball, he's already kind of the mixed figure there. Like, with Kyrie, but I don't think he would take a backseat. Like, he's not going to become a mass distributor. He's not going to be just passing the ball over the place. He's still going to handle the rock, get buckets, get easy layups. So you have to start.
That's why he left. That's why he left Cleveland, right? Like, that was the whole
wanted to be
point.
the man.
Yeah.
And you realize that came with a lot more. So I think that they'll stagger them. I think they'll play early on together, and then they'll probably stagger 2 at a time, which is what we'll see. But it still remains to be seen, man, how this team is even going to be utilized. Like you said, with the new coaching staff who's got to manage all these personalities, man. I mean, what do they do when James Harden decides I want to be the dog, and KD, I don't want to be backseat no more? What do they do now?
Right. Yeah. I would have to imagine that they had a conversation. The Nets, management had a conversation with Kyrie and with Kevin Durant about this scenario. I would have to imagine that, right? Otherwise, you think if they would have traded Kyrie for James Harden, and kept those other pieces. But I'm assuming they had a conversation. Kyrie was on board, KD's on board, and James Harden is on board, and they're not dumb, bro. Like, they have to understand, like, somebody's gonna take a dip here, man. Like, somebody's numbers are gonna go down. But if they can figure that out, yikes, bro. Like, this is a talented team, bro, for sure.
It is. I feel like they're very top heavy, so depth will obviously be tested a lot more than it would have before. I think it was good that they got Landry Shamet, got some other pieces there, some younger pieces. I think.
Joe Harris is still there.
Yeah. Honestly, and I think even Nick Claxton might take a big step forward here too if DeAndre proves to still be a little older. It seems like he's moving slower now. So, Nets fans, talk to us, man. What are your thoughts on the trade? Rockets fans, talk to us. Let us know how you guys are thinking. This was a massive deal, a blockbuster deal to the fullest. You don't see very many like this. James Harden to the Nets. Ooh. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Just Hoop Talk. Another edition of the books. We're out.
Peace.